I want you to stop for a moment and just be here right now. Breathe in the silence of whatever womb you are sitting in. You are listening to this because something inside of you is pacing back and forth like a caged animal. You might be staring at a screen. You might be driving down a dark highway. You might be sitting on the edge of your bed while the rest of the house is fast asleep. I am not here to tell you that everything is going to be all right. I am here to sit with you in the quiet truth of where you actually are. You know the exact feeling I am talking about. It is that heavy, invisible weight resting right on your chest when you finally stop moving for the day. It is not a physical exhaustion, though your bones might ache. It is the exhaustion of carrying a life that does not quite fit the shape of the person you know you were meant to become. Let us just be honest about that for a second. There is a gap between who you are and who you could be, and that gap is starting to keep you awake at night. Let us name that quiet, unspoken reality you have been living with. It is the tiredness that has absolutely nothing to do with how many hours of sleep you got last night. It is the polite smile you hold perfectly in place at work, at the dinner table, in front of your friends, while something deep inside of you has gone completely silent. You are functioning. You are paying the bills. You are showing up where you are supposed to show up. But underneath the machinery of your daily routine, there is a low-frequency hum of dissatisfaction. You feel like you are rehearsing for a performance that keeps getting delayed. You watch the calendar turn, another month gone, another season changing, and the year 2027 is suddenly sitting right there on the horizon, waiting to ask you what you did with the time. The tragedy is not that you are failing. The tragedy is that you are succeeding at things that do not matter to your soul. You are playing a game with the stakes set so low that winning feels exactly the same as losing. And you are tired of pretending that this is enough. I want to acknowledge how long you have been carrying this quiet burden. You have been holding it together for so long that people around you just assume you are made of stone. They bring you their problems. They lean on your stability. They expect you to be the one who never breaks. And because you are strong, you carry their weight on top of your own. But carrying this quietly is not just a sign of strength. It costs you something profound. It costs you your peace, your clarity, and that spark of raw, unedited life that used to sit behind your eyes. Every time you swallow your own truth to keep the peace, every time you settle for a slightly smaller version of your life just to avoid rocking the boat, you are paying a tax on your own spirit. That cost deserves to be named. You have been a good soldier for everyone else's expectations. You have paid your dues to a society that rewards compliance over greatness. But the bill has come due for your own life, and your soul is the one demanding payment. But here is what I know about you, even if we have never met. And yet, despite the fatigue, despite the compromises, there is a stubborn ember burning in the center of your chest that simply refuses to go out. You would not be listening to these words right now if you had completely surrendered. So let me ask you a single, honest question that I want you to let echo in the quiet spaces of your mind. If you knew with absolute certainty that no one was coming to save you, that no lottery ticket was going to be drawn in your favor, and that the only rescue boat available was the one you built with your own two hands, what would you start doing differently tomorrow morning? I am not asking you to change your entire life tonight. I am only asking you to look at the lock on the door and realize that you have been holding the key in your pocket this entire time. The door is not jammed. You have just been too afraid to see what happens when you finally push it open. Over the next stretch of time, I'm going to walk you through the absolute truth about what it takes to become completely unstoppable before that calendar turns to 2027. We are not going to talk about motivation, because motivation is a fleeting emotion that abandons you the second it starts raining. We are going to talk about accountability. We are going to look at the cold, hard mechanics of building a life that you actually respect. This is not about chasing a lifestyle. This is about forging a legacy. I promise you that I will not lie to you, I will not flatter you, and I will not give you empty platitudes to make you feel warm inside. I am going to hand you a mirror. I want you to stop for a moment and just be here, right now. Breathe in that silence again. You are listening because that caged animal inside of you is finally ready to break the bars. Let us begin the work of setting it free. Most people look at a successful life and they only see the bright lights, the accolades, and a freedom. They look at the finished product and they assume it was assembled by magic, or by luck, or by some secret formula handed out to a chosen few. But there is a concept you must understand if you are going to rebuild yourself, and we will call it the ledger law. Success is not an iceberg where most of the ice is hidden underwater. It is a ledger book, bound in heavy leather, sitting on a dusty desk in a room where no one else is allowed to enter. On one side of that ledger is everything you want to achieve before 2027. On the other side is the precise, uncompromising cost of acquiring it. You do not get to negotiate the exchange rate. The universe does not care about your excuses, and it certainly does not care about your potential. Potential is just unpaid debt on the ledger law. Every single breakthrough you are praying for requires a payment in the currency of your time, your comfort, and your ego. The debts required by the ledger law are always paid in complete silence, long before the crowd arrives to applaud. You pay in the currency of early mornings, when the mattress feels like a magnet pulling you back into mediocrity. You pay in the currency of awkward conversations, looking someone in the eye and telling them no, because their priorities no longer align with your mission. You pay in the agonizing currency of sitting at a desk, staring at a blank screen or a complex problem, feeling completely incompetent and refusing to check your phone for a quick hit of cheap dopamine. This is the part nobody shows you in their carefully curated highlight reel. They show you the summit, but they edit out the thousands of hours spent staring at the dirt, putting one heavy boot in front of the other. The people who become truly unstoppable are not immune to the exhaustion of this climb. They have simply accepted that the pain of the climb is preferable to the slow, suffocating decay of staying exactly where they are. Be honest with yourself right now. When was the last time you willingly walked into a situation that you knew was going to break you down? We have engineered our modern lives to eliminate discomfort at every possible turn. We want next-day delivery on our character development. But comfort is the silent assassin of legacy. When you choose the path of least resistance, you are making a withdrawal from your own future. And every time you negotiate with that quiet voice in your head that says you can do it tomorrow, you are letting the rust settle on your blade. The clock doesn't negotiate. The year 2027 is approaching with the relentless, unfeeling precision of a freight train. It does not care if you are ready. It will arrive whether you have spent the next 1,000 days building a fortress or building a prison of comfortable habits. You must start looking at your daily choices not as isolated moments, but as entries in that hidden ledger. Are you operating at a surplus of discipline, or are you drowning in the debt of instant gratification? Perhaps the heaviest payment you will have to make in this ledger is the ego tax. To become unstoppable, you have to be willing to look incredibly foolish for a long period of time. You have to be willing to be the amateur in the room. You have to strip away the protective layer of pride that keeps you doing only the things you are already good at. You already know what I am about to say. Holding on to your current identity is the exact thing keeping you from the life you want. You are protecting a version of yourself that has already served its purpose. It is like wearing a suit of armor that is 3 sizes too small. It might have protected you in the past, but right now, it is only restricting your breath. You must be willing to let that old identity die. You must let people misjudge you. You must let them whisper that you have changed, that you are taking things too seriously, that you are isolating yourself. Let them whisper. Their opinions do not pay your ledger debts, and their comfort will not build your legacy. The ledger demands complete transparency. You cannot lie to it. You can lie to your family. You can lie to your boss. You can lie to the strangers on the internet, but you cannot lie to the ledger. It records every missed workout, every compromised boundary, every hour wasted consuming trash instead of creating value. But here is the beautiful truth about the ledger law. It works in both directions. Every single time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how microscopic, it is recorded. Every time you choose the hard right over the easy wrong, a deposit is made. Over time, those quiet deposits compound into a staggering, unshakable confidence. You stop hoping for success and you start expecting it because you know the math is on your side. You have done the work in the dark and therefore you do not fear the light. That unshakable confidence is not arrogance. It is simply the arithmetic of a person who has paid their dues in full. And that brings us to the exact moment when preparation meets the unknown. We are going to dismantle a lie that you have been sold since you are old enough to understand language. The lie is that success is primarily a matter of being in the right place at the right time. People talk about opportunity as if it were a sudden change in the weather, something that just washes over you if you are lucky enough to be standing outside. But let us introduce a new standard, which we will call the readiness doctrine. Opportunity is not luck. It is the violent, uncompromising collision of absolute preparation with a moment in time that simply cannot wait. When that moment arrives, it does not hand out applications, and it does not give you time to go back to the locker room to lace up your shoes. The moment demands an immediate answer. If you have to get ready when the opportunity presents itself, you have already lost it. The world moves too fast, and the stakes are too high for anyone to wait for you to figure out who you are supposed to be. Genuine readiness is not a state of frantic anticipation. It is a state of heavy, grounded calm. Think of a seasoned firefighter sitting in the station. They are not pacing the floors, biting their nails, wondering if a fire is going to happen today. They are drinking their coffee, maintaining their equipment, resting their minds. But the microsecond that alarm sounds, they transition from absolute rest to absolute execution without a single wasted motion. That is the readiness doctrine in action. You build your skills, you forge your mindset, and you optimize your physical vessel so that when the universe finally taps you on the shoulder, you do not flinch. You do not ask for more time. You just step into the arena because you have already fought the battle 1,000 times in your mind. The problem with most people is that they are waiting for the alarm to sound before they start checking their equipment. They are waiting for the perfect relationship before they start working on their own emotional maturity. They are waiting for the funding before they build the blueprint. There's a specific kind of agony reserved for the person who suddenly encounters the opportunity of a lifetime, only to realize their hands are too weak to hold it. Imagine watching the exact life you have been dreaming about walk right past you and knowing in your bones that you cannot reach for it because you spent the last 5 years taking the easy way out. That is a ghost that will haunt you for the rest of your days. You will try to blame the economy. You will try to blame your upbringing. You will try to blame the circumstances. But in the silent hours of the night, you will know the truth. You will know that the door opened and you were too out of shape, too undisciplined, or too fearful to walk through it. This is not motivation. This is a mirror. Look closely at your daily habits and ask yourself if they are the habits of someone who is preparing to inherit greatness or the habits of someone who is preparing to let it slip through their fingers again. You don't need more information. You need more honesty. You must prepare when there is no applause. You must prepare when there is no immediate payoff. You must prepare when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to just lie down and be normal like everybody else. The preparation phase is brutally lonely because you are building capacity for a weight that you cannot even see yet. It requires you to operate on faith, not a blind, foolish faith, but a deep, kinetic faith in the architecture of your own work ethic. You are laying bricks for a house that does not have a roof yet, while everyone around you is living in comfortable, prefabricated tents. Let them laugh at your slow progress. Let them question your intensity. The readiness doctrine dictates that you do not break focus to explain your architecture to people who are satisfied with living in the mud. You just keep laying the bricks, heavy and true, one after another, knowing that the storm is eventually coming for all of us. When you truly adopt this doctrine, your entire relationship with time changes. You stop seeing a free weekend as an excuse to numb your brain, and you start seeing it as a 48-hour tactical advantage over the version of you from last week. You stop seeing a painful setback as a tragedy, and you start seeing it as a mandatory stress test for your evolving character. The clock doesn't negotiate, and neither should you. You build your readiness in the dark, you sharpen your mind in the silence, and you let your actions echo loudly enough that you never have to raise your voice. The unstoppable individual does not need to announce their arrival. When they walk into the room simply recalibrates to their presence. But to truly understand how this presence is forged and how easily it can be shattered, we need to look at two distinct paths that lie before you. We need to examine what happens when the pressure of reality finally makes contact with the fragile illusions we tell ourselves. Let us observe the first path. Imagine a man who has spent his entire life carefully navigating around the edges of difficulty. We will call him the architect of comfort. On paper, his life looks completely acceptable. He has the job, the vehicle, the polite relationships, and the predictable schedule. He has mastered the art of doing just enough to stay off the radar of failure, but never enough to risk genuine greatness. He reads the books, he listens to the podcasts, he memorizes the quotes about adversity, but he never actually places his hand on the hot stove. He builds his entire identity on untested theories. He believes he is resilient because he has never truly been broken. He believes he is brave because he has never had to look real existential ruin in the eye. He has constructed a beautiful glass house of self-esteem, entirely dependent on the weather staying perfectly calm. But the weather never stays calm forever. Reality is brutally indifferent to the stories we tell ourselves, and eventually, the sky always turns black. When the storm finally hits this man's life, it does not just damage him, it completely disintegrates him. Maybe it is the loss of a career he thought was secure, Maybe it is a medical diagnosis that shatters his timeline. Or maybe it is the sudden collapse of a relationship that anchored his identity. When the pressure arrives, the glass house shatters instantly, because he never voluntarily subjected himself to microdoses of pain and discipline. He has absolutely no emotional immune system. He panics. He lashes out. He looks around frantically for someone to blame, someone to rescue him, someone to fix the injustice of the situation. He collapses inward, falling victim to his own untested fears. The tragedy of this archetype is not that he faced a storm. The tragedy is that he spent his entire life avoiding the very training that would have allowed him to stand firm in the wind. He protected his comfort at the expense of his character, and when the comfort was forcefully removed, there was nothing substantial left underneath. Now, look closely at the second path. This individual did not start out with any special advantages. In fact, they might have started from a deficit, but at some crucial turning point in their life, they made a radical decision. They decided to stop running from the fire and started walking directly into it. When they encountered a weakness in their own character, they did not hide it with arrogance. They exposed it to the light and brutally hammered it into a strength. We will call this person the forged anvil. This individual understood that peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the mastery of conflict. They voluntarily chose the heavy lifting, the early mornings, the difficult conversations, and the agonizing process of learning new skills from the ground up. They cracked under pressure early on, yes, but instead of sweeping the pieces under the rug, they studied the fractures. They rebuilt their foundation with stronger mortar. They did not just read about resilience, they earned it through a daily, unglamorous collision with their own limitations. Watch what happens when the exact same catastrophic storm hits the forged anvil. The sky turns black, the career is threatened, the foundation shakes. They feel the exact same human fear as the first man. Their heart rate spikes, their adrenaline surges, and the temptation to panic is absolutely present. But here is the critical difference. There is a space between the stimulus of the storm and their response to it. In that microscopic space, their training takes over. They do not look for a savior because they know they are the savior. They do not waste precious energy asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, they ask a very different, extremely dangerous question. What does this situation require of me right now? They anchor their feet, they lower their center of gravity, and they brace for impact with the cold, calculated calmness of someone who has survived this feeling 100 times in the practice room. The storm hits them, and they simply absorb the kinetic energy and keep moving forward. You must hold these two archetypes in your mind every single morning when you wake up. The architect of comfort and the forged anvil are not two different species of human beings. They are two different sets of daily choices. They are the two wolves living inside of your own chest. Which one is going to dictate your actions today? When you hit the snooze button, when you scroll mindlessly for an hour, when you avoid the difficult conversation, you are handing a brick to the architect of comfort. When you step into the cold water, when you hold your tongue instead of complaining, when you sit down to do the work you promised yourself you would do, you are striking the hammer on the forged anvil. Legacy is built in silence when no one is watching. It is built in those microscopic, completely invisible moments of decision that nobody else will ever know about. You cannot fake the anvil. You cannot pretend to be strong when the real weight is finally placed on your shoulders. You are either ready or you are exposed. The brutal reality of 2027 is that it will test exactly which archetype you have become. It will strip away your social media bio. It will strip away your clever excuses, and it will demand to see the raw underlying architecture of your character. If you want to be unshakable when that year arrives, you must stop outsourcing your strength to external circumstances. You must stop. I have a far more racist circumstance than I have in my city. But to build that strength, you need resources. You need raw materials to forge the anvil. And the most critical raw material you possess is currently being stolen from you in broad daylight while you sit there and willingly hold the door open for the thieves. We talk endlessly about time management, but time is just a vessel. The true currency of greatness, the actual lifeblood of becoming unstoppable, is something far more delicate and far more violently contested. It is time to secure your perimeter. I want you to stop for a moment and just be here right now. Listen to the cadence of my voice and let the noise of the outside world fall away completely. We are going to introduce our third standard, which we will call the attention fortress. You have been told your entire life that time is your most valuable asset. That is incomplete. Time is utterly useless if your mind is fractured into 1,000 different directions. Attention, not time, is your most finite and sacred resource. Where you direct your attention dictates the literal reality you inhabit. If you give your attention to gossip, your life becomes a trivial soap opera. If you give your attention to outrage, your life becomes a bitter battlefield. If you give your attention to mastery, your life becomes a monument. The people you look up to, the ones who seem truly unstoppable, do not have more hours in the day than you do. They have simply built a massive, impenetrable wall around their focus, and they treat their attention like a heavily guarded vault. There are 3 thieves constantly circling your fortress, looking for a way in. The first thief is manufactured urgency. This is the endless stream of notifications, breaking news, and artificial emergencies designed by algorithms to hijack your nervous system. They convince you that you must react immediately to things that will not matter in a week, let alone in a year. The second thief is the opinions of people who have not earned the right to speak into your life. You are spending massive amounts of emotional bandwidth worrying about the judgments of people who are barely managing their own dysfunctional lives. Why are you handing the keys to your mental fortress to someone who has never built anything of value? Let them judge you from the cheap seats while you do the bleeding in the arena. You must ruthlessly sever the cord that connects your self-worth to the fleeting approval of the crowd. If you require their applause to get moving, you will be paralyzed the exact moment they decide to stop clapping. The third and most dangerous thief is already inside the walls of your fortress. It is your own untested fears. These are the imaginary, catastrophic scenarios you play on a continuous loop in your mind. You spend hours fighting phantom battles, draining your attention on things that have not happened and likely never will. You rehearse failure so vividly that your nervous system believes it is already your reality. You must understand that anxiety is just misdirected imagination. You are using your greatest cognitive superpower to construct a prison cell. The attention fortress requires you to evict these phantom fears. When you catch yourself spiraling into the abyss of what if, you must drag your attention back to the physical present. You look at your hands. You look at the desk. You ask yourself, what is the very next physical action I can take right now to move forward? You do not solve a 10-year problem today. You only execute today's protocol. You lock the gates of your fortress and you focus entirely on the square foot of ground you are currently standing on. Building the attention fortress is not a passive exercise. It is an act of daily warfare. It means turning off your phone for 3 hours every morning so you can do deep, uninterrupted work. It means curating your environment so fiercely that anything which does not serve your mission is quietly removed from your sightline. It means becoming incredibly comfortable with ignoring people. Yes, you will miss out on things. You will miss the trending topics. You will miss the latest controversies. And you will occasionally take longer to reply to a casual text message. But you already know what I am about to say. The price of being accessible to everyone is that you become completely useless to yourself. You cannot forge greatness while keeping one eye on the circus. You have to commit to the silence. You have to learn to love the boredom that comes right before the breakthrough. When you finally stop numbing your mind with cheap distraction, your brain will panic for a few days, but then something miraculous will happen. After the withdrawal from distraction subsides, a profound clarity will wash over you. Your thoughts will stretch out, become slower, heavier, and far more powerful. You will realize that you have the capacity to solve complex problems simply because you can hold them in your mind longer than the average person. This sustained focus is the hammer you will use to strike the anvil. It is the only tool that can cut through the noise and carve out a reality that you actually want to inhabit by 2027. Once your attention is secured, once the fortress walls are up and the thieves are locked out, you are finally ready to begin the actual work of transformation. But you must understand that this transformation will not happen in a straight line. The path to becoming unstoppable is not a smooth escalator ride to the top. It is a grueling, repetitive, and often violent process of breaking down and rebuilding over and over again until the weakness is completely bred out of your system. We are going to map out the exact architecture of human evolution, a framework we will call the spiral standard. Most people fundamentally misunderstand how growth operates. They look at a chart with a line going straight up and to the right, and they get deeply discouraged when their own life feels like they are moving in circles. But you are not moving in a circle. You are moving in a spiral. It is a 6-stage cycle that repeats indefinitely, but each time you complete a rotation, you are standing at a higher elevation. The cycle is always the same. Absorb, struggle, break, rebuild, test, and elevate. If you try to skip any of these stages, the spiral collapses and you fall right back to the bottom. The reason you feel stuck right now is probably because you are trying to avoid the breaking phase. You want the elevation without the destruction. But to become completely unstoppable by 2027, you must learn to navigate this spiral, not with fear, but with absolute predatory anticipation. The cycle begins with the absorb phase. You step into a new arena, a new skill, or a new level of responsibility, and you act like a sponge. You shut your mouth, you open your eyes, and you take in the reality of how little you actually know. You accept your incompetence without letting it damage your ego. Then, very quickly, you enter the struggle phase. The theory meets friction. You try to execute, and you fail. You try again, and you fail harder. The struggle is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. The struggle is the biological sensation of your nervous system building new pathways. You must fall in love with the frustration. When did you last feel genuinely incompetent and refuse to quit? Most people hit the struggle phase, decide it is not meant for them, and walk away to find something easier. But you are going to stay right there in the fire. You are going to let the heat rise, let the confusion set in, and push yourself right to the very edge of your current capacity. Because what comes next is mandatory. The third stage is the break. This is the moment of absolute failure. Your current systems, your current mindset, and your current energy levels are completely overwhelmed by the demand. You drop the weight, you lose the deal, you break down in the quiet of your room. This is the exact moment where your legacy is decided. The weak man views the break as a permanent verdict on his worth. The unstoppable man views the break as a diagnostic report. He looks at the shattered pieces on the floor and he moves immediately into the rebuild phase. This is the quiet pivot. You do not cry over the broken pieces. You examine the fracture points. Why did this fail? Where was I weak? What truth was I ignoring? You forge new habits, stronger boundaries, and better systems. You use heavier mortar. The rebuild phase is where the actual muscle is grown. It requires tremendous humility and an absolute refusal to let a temporary defeat mutate into a permanent identity. Once the new architecture is in place, you enter the test phase. You carry your newly rebuilt self back into the exact same arena that broke you the last time. You face the same weight, the same market, or the same emotional trigger, but this time you do not shatter. You hold the line. You absorb the impact, and the structure holds firm. When you pass the test, you cross into the elevate phase. The noise dies down. The movement becomes fluid. What used to demand maximum conscious effort now happens automatically. You have successfully expanded your baseline capacity, and you are standing on a higher ring of the spiral. But listen to me very carefully. The elevate phase is not a permanent resting place. It is just the launching pad for the next rotation. The moment you get comfortable, the moment you start admiring your own handiwork, the universe will introduce a heavier weight, and the cycle of absorb and struggle will begin all over again. The clock doesn't negotiate, and the spiral never ends. The master does not pray for an end to the spiral. He prays for the stamina to climb it forever. By the time 2027 arrives, you must have completed this cycle dozens, if not hundreds, of times. You must become a professional at breaking down your own limitations and rebuilding them into fortified steel. This is how a person becomes truly unshakable. It is not by walking around with a puffed out chest. It is by carrying the quiet, deadly knowledge that no matter what life throws at them, they know how to process it through the machinery of the spiral. But machinery alone is not enough. You can have all the theoretical frameworks in the world. You can understand the spiral, and you can secure your attention, but none of it will activate without the electricity of daily execution. We must now bring this down from the philosophical heights and bolt it directly to the floorboards of your everyday life. We must talk about the brutal mechanics of how you govern your next 24 hours. We must now make this journey to the president. The internet is completely saturated with gurus selling you the perfect morning routine. They tell you to wake up at absurd hours, drink specific concoctions, and journal in a particular notebook, promising that this sequence of events will magically unlock your success. But this is not motivation. This is a mirror. A routine without character is just a polite form of procrastination. We are going to elevate the conversation beyond mere habits, because systems only matter when they are a direct expression of your identity. If you force a millionaire's morning routine onto a mind that still identifies as a victim, the routine will collapse within a week. You will find an excuse to sleep in, because your self-image will always sabotage actions that contradict it. Therefore, we do not start by changing what you do. We start by brutally re-engineering how you see yourself. You must stop identifying as someone who is trying to get better and start identifying as someone who simply does not accept mediocrity under any circumstances. The framework for your morning does not require a complex ritual. It requires a singular, violent act of authority over your own mind. The moment your eyes open, you are at war. The architect of comfort will whisper that it is cold outside, that you worked hard yesterday, that 5 more minutes will not hurt. If you negotiate with that voice, you have lost the entire day before your feet have even touched the floor. The morning framework is simple. You wake up and you immediately execute one difficult task that establishes your dominance over your own impulses. It could be physical training. It could be plunging into cold water. It could be sitting in absolute silence with your thoughts for 20 minutes. The specific action matters less than the psychology behind it. You are sending a massive, undeniable shockwave to your nervous system that says, I am the one in charge here. You do this not to punish yourself, but to calibrate your mind to the frequency of absolute accountability. Throughout the chaos of your day, you must establish one daily, non-negotiable. This is a solitary anchor point that you will execute regardless of the weather, regardless of your mood, and regardless of how many emergencies try to hijack your schedule. It is a promise you make to yourself that is carved in stone. If your non-negotiable is writing for 1 hour, you write for 1 hour, even if the house is on fire. If it is closing 3 deals, you do not sleep until those 3 deals are closed. This anchor creates a psychological firewall against failure. Even if the rest of your day completely falls apart, even if everything goes wrong, you still secure that one fundamental victory. Over time, hitting this non-negotiable day after day builds an impenetrable core of self-respect. You start to trust your own work. When you tell yourself you are going to do something, your brain stops treating it as a suggestion and starts treating it as an absolute prophecy. This is the cornerstone of the unstoppable mindset. How you close your day is just as critical as how you open it. The evening review is where the ledger is updated. Before you shut your eyes, you do not look at screens, and you do not numb your brain with entertainment. You sit in the quiet, and you face the honest mirror of the past 16 hours. Did I execute my non-negotiable? Did I guard my attention fortress? Did I operate from a place of character, or did I slip back into the comfortable habits of my old identity? You must be ruthlessly objective during this review. Do not judge yourself with excessive cruelty, but do not offer yourself unearned grace either. If you failed, you look the failure in the eye, you diagnose the fracture point, and you commit to the rebuild. You close the ledger, you forgive yourself for the missteps, and you go to sleep with a completely clear conscience, knowing that tomorrow morning, the war begins anew. This daily rhythm of aggressive execution and quiet reflection is how legacy is manufactured. When your routines become an expression of your character rather than a bandage for your insecurities, your entire demeanor shifts. People will start to notice a quiet, heavy gravity about you. They will not understand what has changed, but they will sense that you are no longer playing the same shallow games they are. You are operating on a completely different timeline. You are not trying to win the weekend. You are trying to win the decade. But as you elevate your standards and leave the crowd behind, you will inevitably face moments of profound doubt. You will hit walls that seem entirely insurmountable, and your mind will try to convince you that quitting is actually the wise, strategic choice. It is in these lonely valleys of the journey that you will need a mechanism to separate truth from deception. You will need a way to look at yourself without any filters, to ensure you have not drifted off the path. The human mind is a master of self-deception. We are incredibly skilled at rationalizing our own retreat, dressing our cowardice up in the language of strategic wisdom. When things get too heavy, your brain will suddenly produce a very logical argument for why you should lower your standards. We must combat this with a protocol called the honest mirror test. This is a mechanism of self-assessment stripped of all ego, all excuses, and all external narratives. You cannot bring your resume to the honest mirror. You cannot bring your past trauma, and you cannot bring your good intentions. The mirror only reflects absolute, undeniable reality. When you are staring at a massive obstacle and considering walking away, you must stand before this mirror and ask yourself the hardest questions imaginable. You must differentiate between a genuine tactical pivot, which is sometimes necessary, and a disguised surrender. Surrender always feels like relief in the moment, but it leaves a toxic residue in your soul that will poison your confidence for years to come. The honest mirror test requires 3 specific questions, asked in complete silence every single week. First, am I actually tired, or am I just uninspired because the work has become boring? Greatness is largely a matter of surviving the boredom of doing the mundane things perfectly over and over again. If you are quitting because it is no longer exciting, you are acting like a child throwing away a toy. Second, is this obstacle genuinely insurmountable, or does it just require a version of me that I am currently too lazy to become? Most of the time, the wall in front of you is not made of stone. It is made of your own reluctance to evolve. You are staring at a skill deficit and calling it an impossibility. Be honest with yourself right now. Are you retreating because the path is blocked? Or are you retreating because the toll to cross the bridge requires more discipline than you want to pay? The third and final question of the mirror is the heaviest. If I stop right now, can I live in peace with the person I will become? I want you to stop for a moment and just be here, right now. Really let that question settle in your chest. If you walk away from the standard you set for 2027, you might find temporary relief, but you will spend the rest of your life knowing that you backed down when the fire got hot. But here is what I know. Sometimes the mirror reveals that you are indeed climbing the wrong mountain. Sometimes a true strategic pivot is required. The difference is in the emotional aftermath. A strategic pivot brings a sense of deep focused clarity and redirects your aggressive energy toward a better target. Quitting, dressed up as wisdom, brings a hollow, lingering shame and leads to a life of passive distraction. The honest mirror does not let you confuse the two. It forces you to look your own character right in the eyes. When you subject yourself to this level of scrutiny, you burn away all the deadwood in your personality. You stop lying to yourself, which means you stop lying to the world.